Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us again this year for our back to school discussion panel concerning our kiddos with hearing loss. Uh, going to have an awesome discussion panel with you guys. We're going to go through different scenarios, see what goes on for both the kids and the folks that take care of them on a day-to-day basis, how they get through school, and what we can do to help them out. Um, just before we get started, if you have questions, just please keep them in mind what they are, and we're going to cover all the questions at the end. But we're going to go into a lot of discussions, so things might come up, and you might come up with a question hearing the way that our panelists answer the questions. So please just keep them to yourself at the time being, and then we'll definitely cover them all towards the end. But I want to go ahead and get everybody acquainted with our panelists. Um, I am just here moderating. My name is Josh Severe. I am an audiologist at UChicago Medicine. And then I'm just going to go through everybody on the order of my screen that I see them right now. So if you wouldn't mind, just give us an idea of who you are, where you work, what you do, and kind of how many kids you have on your caseload at the moment. And we'll start since Rollen, you're right here, first one on my top left corner. If you wouldn't mind, get us started.
Sure. My name is Rollen Cooper, and I'm the director of the Early Intervention Program at Child's Voice. And Child's Voice has a couple locations. One is in Wooddale in the suburbs, and the other one is in the city of Chicago in the Roscoe Village neighborhood. So my job mainly is administrative. So we serve about 60, 65 families throughout the suburbs and the city. So my role really is doing some initial evaluations of babies as they're coming into the EI system and getting into IFSPs and services. I work with a lot of staff members, doing some mentoring with staff members, helping families find services in the community. And then I also do a lot with families as they're transitioning from EI services into preschool services.
Fantastic. Thanks for being here tonight. Molly, you would be up next.
Thank you, and thanks, Josh, for having me tonight. My name is Dr. Molly Berry. I am an audiologist. I originally started my practice in the ENT setting. So I was just talking to these guys here and letting them know I worked with some amazing ENTs that really worked with me. We kind of taught each other about the hearing loss, how it affects the kids, how it affects adults. So it was a really great learning environment. I used to fit hearing aids from pediatric to adults, so I've done the whole gamut of age. I then worked in the private practice sector for a little bit, and then I also worked for one of the major hearing aid manufacturers as a technical support audiologist, helping audiologists fit both hearing aids and the some people call them FM systems, some people call them hearing assistive technology devices, basically the assisted listening devices. So I'd help them troubleshoot and fit those. And then I transitioned over to Chicago Public Schools. So I am currently an educational audiologist for the last going on 9 years in February. So I've been an audiologist for 22 years total, 15 years. Actually, my math, I probably shouldn't have said that out loud. 15 years originally in the clinic and private practice settings, and then these past coming up on 9 years in Chicago Public Schools. So I feel like it's a good mix of clinical and educational, and it's a combination of both. And I have about 100 kids on my caseload, 100 plus students, which is a very, very large caseload. But I do have to say it is better than it used to be. We used to have about closer to 200 kids. We only had 8 audiologists in the whole city, but now we are up to 15, I think we're up to. So yay for us. Not quite as crazy, and able to see more kids and do a better job of working with them and their families and the staff of our schools. So that is me.
Wow, it's glad it is better, but that's still just outrageous to think
It's a
about
lot.
what it used to be
It's
and
a
what it
lot.
is even now. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a lot.
absolutely. And Sam.
Hi, everyone. Good evening, Josh. Thanks so much for putting this little shindig together. My name is Samantha Dixon. I go by Sam. I'm a pediatric audiologist at the University of Chicago Medicine. I've been here for over 3 years, but I've been practicing audiology for 8 years. At University of Chicago, we have pediatric services at both the Hyde Park main campus and the Orland Park location. I am actually the pediatric audiologist that provides the services in the Orland Park. And then the other half of the week, I'm at the Hyde Park location. At Hyde Park, I service patients ages birth to 21 years. At Orland Park, I service patients ages 6 months to 21 years, and that's really just an equipment thing for below 6 months. And then in terms of my caseload, I have almost 100 patients with hearing aids and or cochlear implants who I see routinely, usually every 6 to 12 months for a hearing test to monitor their hearing loss, and then probably about every 3 to 6 months for device checks, and of course as needed. And then the rest of my schedule, being at a main hospital, is filled primarily with diagnostic hearing testing, such as infants who did not pass a newborn hearing screening, or patients referred to me for a variety of reasons, anything related to hearing loss concerns. A big one is delayed speech and language development for our younger kiddos. And so that is me.
So much going on. So much going on. Yeah, definitely thank you again for being here and doing this tonight. As I was telling you before we got started, I think a lot of folks don't really know what all you guys do behind the scenes. And I think a lot of parents that are getting these new diagnoses and they're trying to navigate this world, trying to help them figure out that process and just what they can do. A lot of this is just information we don't have just yet. So thanks again for being here tonight. So this is for all of you. This is just open discussion. What does a day in the life of you look like for the kids you see? What are you doing for them on a day-to-day basis? And what are you doing for them throughout their school year?
Who wants to pick it up? I'll pick it up. As I was mentioning too, for day in the life, you know, I do the routine audios and hearing aid and cochlear implant checks. And when I think about like throughout the school year, providing copies of reports to either the parents to take over to other professionals at the school, ideally I'd like to remove them, you know, being the middleman. So I work with Molly and I've worked with Ronan too. So I have their contact information. So if we're seeing the same kiddo, I know I can reach out to them and then we can exchange that information, you know, exchange those reports to make sure that we're all on the same page. I think, you know, that coordination of care piece is so important. Kids are going to tell, there's going to be different stories from kids, from parents. I think, you know, I'm going to hear something different. They might hear something different. What the kids, you know, they get that, you know, bird's eye view of what's going on in the school, which I do not. And I'm just relying on report from the parent. So those are kind of, you know, some things I aim for. And then I just try to provide education to the parents throughout the school year, you know, making sure that reminding them to check in with the other professionals at the school, ask about FM systems, that sort of thing.
You want me to take a turn, or Rollen, you want to go? I'll go. Okay. Our days at CPS are pretty busy. So our main jobs, I guess I didn't explain what the educational audiologist does when you asked kind of what I do. So one of our main jobs is to maintain, write, prepare, work. Collaboration is a huge portion of our jobs. We work with, obviously, U of C, Sam, her team, all the other hospitals, private audiologists, clinicians, Rollen, even because I also work what we call the citywide assessment, who bring in the little ones transitioning from EI into CPS early childhood. So what we do, we work as collaborative teams, a team of a multidisciplinary team of speech pathologists, OTs, PTs, occupational therapists, physical therapists, special education teachers, school psychologists, and all of us work together to create plans if the students, in fact, do need plans due to their hearing loss. I firmly believe no child doesn't benefit from acoustic accommodations in their classes, in their classrooms. I am a huge, I come from a family of educators, and so some people think I say too much because I like to really make sure families know what the hearing loss is of their child. It's really difficult when the children seem to function normally, even without their hearing aids, and they say, I just don't understand, they have this hearing loss, but they hear me all the time. And they don't know, the little guys don't know what they don't hear. So they don't know to ask for repetition, and they don't know what they missed in their busy classroom. So it is my job as the educational audiologist to meet with the teachers, meet with the staff. In the beginning of the year, I send out an email and say, hey, I introduce who I am, and then I let them know this child is in your class. They do have hearing loss. And then I set up meetings with them. So I make sure they know they have the hearing loss. Sorry, I kind of jumped around there from the IEP and the 504 plans. So we do first create those plans for the kids. Once they have the individualized education plans or the 504 plan that is not special education, but just accommodations and modifications for the hearing loss, we make sure the teacher knows that the student has that plan. And then a lot of people don't know what hearing loss is, how it affects someone in a classroom. And coming from the clinical side, it was actually, very eye-opening to me. Even a very mild or minimal hearing loss can really affect a child when they are in an academic setting. The classrooms are very reverberant. The acoustics are not always great. So we have to make sure they sit very close to the teacher, and we don't always say in front because the teachers tend to walk around the classroom. We also let them know to repeat and rephrase things. Children with hearing loss, especially if their ability to understand speech isn't clear, especially if they're not wearing amplification, they'll ask the child, did you hear that? And they'll smile and nod. And then if you say, oh, we always like to have them follow up, what did I say? And they look at you like, and then they're like, oh, they didn't catch that. So I do really enforce that. So we write the IEPs, the audiology portion of the IEPs. We work very, very closely with teachers of the deaf and hard of hearing. So a lot of our students get a teacher of a deaf and hard of hearing attached with the audiologist, even for consultation with the teachers. Because our caseloads are so large, our teachers of the deaf and hard of hearing help us keep in constant communication with the students, with the teachers. But my goal and my role as an educational audiologist, I work with parents, staff, teachers, special teachers, anyone that's interacting with children with hearing loss on a daily basis to let them know, hey, don't forget, because as we say, hearing loss is an invisible disability that we forget. And even me as an audiologist, I'll start, we start out real strong, and then all of a sudden we'll speak quickly because, students with hearing loss need speech very slow, not very, very slow, but much slower. They need things repeated. Like I said, they need things rephrased. So we really focus on this and let them know, I actually send out a cheat sheet kind of to the teachers and say, these are the different things or the different aspects of hearing loss, how they're going to affect your student in the classroom, how they can affect the student in the classroom. So please be mindful. And then throughout the year, I often send reminders. I just want to remind you and check in, see how they're doing. And as Sam was saying, that our relationship with the clinics in the universities is very, very important. A lot of times it is a struggle to get those hearing tests. And if we don't know the current levels of hearing, it's hard to kind of advocate for the children and the parents and the family. But U of C, I do have to say, and it's not just because we're on this panel, I do have a really good relationship with them, and they do a great job of getting us up-to-date hearing tests so we know what we're working with.
Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course. Oh, and I forgot. We troubleshoot. So the audiologist in the schools make sure the hearing aids are working. If they do have an FM or an assistive listening technology device that they are using while in school, the teachers let us know, the deaf and hard of hearing teachers let us know. Hopefully the parents will let us know if they know the hearing aids aren't working or they're lost. So we make a point, no matter what we're doing in our day, we might not be able to get out there right away, but either the next day or the following day, we make a plan. We will come out and check if it's something we can fix, like a tube change, or there's a hole in the tubing, or something just isn't right, there's feedback. We can check that first so that the parents don't have to make an extra trip to the hospitals or their clinics to have it tested when it's something we could have fixed easily in our classrooms or at our school settings.
Awesome.
Molly, I had a question for you. So this is a great, I love having all of us together because this is something we haven't done yet, even though we talk a lot about patients, specific patients. Just I'm taking this as a learning experience for me to see what I can do. Yeah, better to help you guys. So who kicks up, like, how does a 504 plan or an IEP get, like, who initiates that in like a new diagnosis of hearing loss, especially for a kid who doesn't have a plan like that in place because they're otherwise, healthy, no other issue?
Absolutely. So in CPS, is it okay if I call it CPS, Chicago Public Schools? There are hearing screeners, first of all. So there are certain grades in Chicago Public Schools where the children have to have their hearing screened. But once a child has been diagnosed, it's really, really important that the parent lets the school know my child has a hearing loss. The case manager is the point of contact at the school for the parents, the principals, and then an audiologist is assigned to areas. So my area is predominantly south, southeast, southwest. So I have case managers at every single school. They know I'm their audiologist. I reach out, or case managers will actually reach out to us and say, hey, I have a new little one who came to us. He has hearing aids in, or she just has a new hearing loss, and immediately it's on our radar. So then we start reaching out and kind of the ball gets rolling. So either the case manager, the audiologist, a teacher. And I do have to say, for such a large school district, we really try to educate our other staff members and team members or speech pathologists. Someone will say, hey, I saw a little guy walking around the school with the hearing aids. I'm like, oh, I need to know about him, and then I'll investigate. So yes, it could be it could be a principal, a case manager, a teacher, a parent, an audiologist. Sometimes even other little students will say, hey, he has a hearing aid, and I'm like, oh, wait, what? I didn't see that. So yeah, so those are the point of contact people, but then always our manager, they will reach out to our manager and say, hey, who's the audiologist for this area? And then we get that ball rolling. So, oh, and then there's hearing screenings. So if they fail a hearing screening at school and have not been diagnosed yet, they will be screened twice. When they do fail, each time a letter will go home to the parent and say, hey, your child failed this hearing screening, you need to follow up. So they can come to one of our clinics for a comprehensive exam, or the parents can take them to a private audiologist as well, follow through that way. And then again, the ball kind of just gets rolling from there. So we do everything we can to prevent children from falling through the cracks.
Yeah, I was going to say too, just from an early intervention perspective, we work really hard with the kids as they're transitioning into preschool. So really making sure they're aware. Many of our kids go to Chicago Public Schools and then a variety of suburban school districts. So really, helping the families know what the process is, at what point are they going to have a transition meeting, which is something that takes place usually when anywhere from a time that a kid is 2 years, 6 months to 2 years, 9 months. And there's a transition meeting that's really just giving parents some education about the upcoming IEP and so forth. I think we work really hard with helping parents understand what the different steps are in the process. And I think one thing that's really key for families who are in early intervention is that how kids qualify for services in early intervention is different than how they qualify in a school setting. So, in the state of Illinois, really almost all children with almost any kind of hearing loss can automatically qualify for EI services. The only exceptions really are if a child has a kind of like a slight hearing loss at just 1 or 2 frequencies, but other than that, they almost always auto qualify. But when they go into a school setting, that's not necessarily the case. So in a school setting, they're really going to look more at a child's eligibility through maybe how they've done on standardized testing, or how they've done maybe through a play-based assessment, or any kind of data maybe that the parents can bring or the early interventionist brings. And that's how they qualify for services, depending on, what their skills are like. They might qualify for a 504, they might qualify for an IEP, all different sorts of things. But really helping parents kind of understand, what kind of services are offered at a school, what their child might qualify for, and I know everyone's kind of already mentioned collaboration, but I feel like that's such a huge part of it for our kids with hearing loss. And I think that's true as parents are going into that first initial IEP meeting, because they're really establishing a relationship with the school district that they're going to have, potentially from the time the child is 3 till the child is 18 and graduating from high school. So it's really important, I think, that parents are good at advocating for their kids, but also good at making relationships with the people that are going to be providing the services.
And Ron, that's a really good point that you made. So thank you. I'm glad you brought that up. And Ron and I will even be in meetings together, transitioning the little ones from the early intervention into the school setting. And even coming from the clinic, I had to remember it's how the hearing loss has an impact on their academic performance. But I will say those criterion have gotten much better. So it used to have to be a certain degree. Well, now it's pretty much if they have hearing loss, they do have the right to some services, depending on the amount of services and the intensity of the services. That's where we kind of see the differences, where some families do get upset and frustrated. And I understand you go from EI, weekly services, one-on-one, but in the school setting, if they're doing really great and they're really flourishing, we don't want to hold them back. So that's one of the things we have to remember. And in the school system, we always focus on what we call the least restrictive environment. So our goal is to get, our children with hearing loss in with their peers, their same aged peers, their typically hearing peers, to get, good speech models, good social emotional models, good like socialization models. And sometimes the programs that parents are really hoping their kids will be in would actually restrict their child more and kind of hold them back. And we never obviously want to do that. So it does come down to, okay, how does this affect them? And we do have, so their initial IEP is called their initial IEP, sorry, that's what it's called, or an FIE. So that is our first meeting that we have. And then from that point on, they have an annual meeting every year that we update. And the clinicians or whoever is involved, if the child gets services, and that's that 504 we were discussing. If they don't get an IEP where they have special education goals, because their academics are very well and doing very well, they're up to par with their same age typically hearing peers and or exceeding them, we don't want to give them an IEP if they don't need it. So the 504 plan would just be accommodations and just to help them as much as they possibly can with their hearing, because they have their hearing loss. And then each year we call it either, you'll hear lots of different terms, triennial, the 3-year, but there's a 3-year mandatory reevaluation process. So the students are reevaluated by the team. They'll get a full assessment on that 3-year mark to say, okay, let's do the testing again. Where are they falling? But we call it always in CPS a living document or a fluid document. If changes are happening and they're really, really struggling, we can always add more services. Or if they're really flourishing and doing a fantastic job and they're feeling, they don't need these as much, intense supports, then we kind of pull back on some of those. So the parents are involved. Absolutely a very important team member. And it is, we look at every aspect of the child and kind of go from there in the educational setting.
That's awesome. I'm really glad you touched on that, because there's one thing that we hear a lot in the clinic. I've been hearing more and more recently is what happens after I hit 3? What happens after EI is over with? What do we do now? And the panic sets in. We've been having these services. How do we go to this? So it's really awesome to hear about the transitional process and how people evaluate them and help them through that, because I know it is a very stressful thing that a lot of parents relate to us pretty regularly, actually. So really appreciate that. Speaking of the
Yeah.
IEPs and the 504s, specifically, what advice would you have for parents and everything going into those meetings if they were to attend? I know you guys touched on it just a touch, but the process for the child and everything. But as far as the parents wanting to be there for their child or sitting in those meetings, what advice would you recommend for them attending those?
I
I
think
was
I was just gonna say, I think the key thing is being as prepared as you can before the meeting. So again, kind of like I said, knowing, what are the possible services your child could qualify for, knowing kind of how they qualify, knowing, having parents know that they play a really important part in the meeting, I think is really important. Um, I think too, it's important. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there. Um, Knowing how they qualify for services. Oh, sometimes especially more in like suburban school districts, sometimes parents have an opportunity prior to the IEP to observe what might be some potential programs. So if you're in a situation where you've got that opportunity, that's really good. Sometimes you can observe like a general preschool. Sometimes you can observe a specialized class for kids that are deaf and hard of hearing. But if you have the opportunity to see those prior to the meeting, then that gives you something to kind of go on when they're talking about the different kind of placements. Sometimes that's not an option beforehand, but sometimes a family might find out where their child is going to be placed. And even then at that point, once they have that placement, then it's really good to go out and kind of like tour it, sort of see, what it's like, get some questions answered. I know we've had some families like in Chicago public schools who have gotten assigned to a school. The parents go out and see it, and they've gotten all of their questions answered and their concerns addressed. So I think doing that beforehand is really good. And again, it's establishing a nice relationship with your child's future teacher. Having that teacher know that you're, looking to be a partner in your child's education. I think those things are really important. And two, I heard Molly say earlier about the IEP being a fluid document. And I think that's really important. I think at most schools, they either have like a quarter basis or a trimester basis where there's 3 or 4 times a year where you're looking at the progress that the child is making with their IEP goals. And if something is even going wrong, not wrong, but if things are not going as planned mid-year, you can even, call a meeting mid-year to see if there's, services that need to be added or changes that need to be made.
Oh, sorry, Molly. I said off mute. I was just going to add to like just going for attending an IEP meeting, and I'm sorry, I live by the train. The train's going by. For attending an IEP meeting, I'd love just as a clinical audiologist for some of these patients. I always try to advise the family, give the team my contact information. I'd love to be invited to these meetings and be included on it, so that way I think we're still in this progress of trying to really close the loop too with that. And I've actually done that before with another patient where I was able to sit on the IEP meeting, and it was really helpful for me too to see, because they also talk about strengths of the child and what their goals are, and then I can use that information and take it back into the clinic as well. So just from a clinical audiologist point of view, that's something I would also recommend to parents and families.
And I was also going to add, if you can, I know it's very hard, go in with an open mind. There's so many differences, again, going from the clinical to the educational setting. And especially when we do the transition from the early intervention into early childhood, it is hard. And I think we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think it's really important to stress again that difference. And I think sometimes it's hard to hear, well, we can't give them as much services as they got in early intervention because their days are short and there's not, as many teachers, and it's not just they've gotten them to this critical point within those 3, really critical formative years of their language learning, hearing, like the hearing, and I can't stress enough how much of a role hearing plays in children's speech and language development. And it's not just speech. It is surprising sometimes when I see little ones, I keep saying little ones, I'm sorry, young children getting diagnosed in second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade with hearing loss, and they've had speech all along, not necessarily just at CPS. And I think sometimes like, why didn't anyone, think to do this hearing test? So, and again, some kids can get by and they sneak by, and it's just really important to kind of keep in mind, God, Ron, I'm losing my train of thought. That difference between clinical versus educational. And it was a learning curve for me as well. And they had to say, remember this is, clinical versus, and we do have quite a more of a crossover than I think other areas, because we are still so intertwined with clinical and educational audiology, because they wear their hearing aids, their cochlear implants, their Bahas, their bone conduction hearing aids. We still have to work so closely together that we are constantly monitoring and assessing and watching and testing. So that's important. So, and again, yes, be you're an advocate for your child. And one thing is, during these conferences, any school system, we like to use acronyms. And when I first started in CPS, literally, I probably heard about 20, and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I don't know what they're talking about. Please ask what something means. Again, like I said, I like to inform parents and staff and teachers, friends, anybody that will listen, basically, about hearing loss and what those acronyms are. And okay, I missed that, I'm not sure. And a lot of educators not even think it's just so commonplace to them, the tests the kids take, even the names of the tests or what they test. And they just may throw it out there, ask what those tests are and ask what you're referring to. And it can be intimidating, the parent, the child, maybe a spouse, maybe a cousin, maybe a partner. It's intimidating to walk into these rooms of 10 to 15 clinicians kind of all looking at you, looking at your child, but we all really do enjoy being there, and that's why we chose to do it. And we all have a purpose, obviously, but it just know you're a really important part of that team, for sure.
That's great. I appreciate that. I kind of touching along those same lines a little bit. You talked about interacting with the children pretty frequently. How often is there set intervals of how often you check in with a child each school year? Is it just kind of as needed, or how's that process work? And when should a parent or one of the children reach out to you if they're having issues?
Absolutely. Reach out anytime you can, anytime needed. Obviously, if you're just checking in every single day, that might be a little excessive. But with us having, an enormous amount of students on our caseloads, we do check in at least once quarterly. So our year is broken down into quarters, and they have the quarterly. Audiologists don't write goals for children with hearing loss. We are constant. Teachers of deaf and hard of hearing, if they are assigned to a child with hearing loss, they write goals and they have benchmarks quarterly and monitor them. So there is constant progress monitoring to see, are they meeting their goals. I tell parents in our meetings, we have a set time, but usually the time listed on that IEP for the audiologist is less than they will actually see your child or student, unless they have absolutely no trouble. We do often check in with the teachers at least once a quarter. Hey, how's it going? Are you noticing any problems? We give them questionnaires. We reach out to the parents to say, how's it going? What's, anything you're noticing? Even clinical audiologists will reach out to me and say, hey, Molly, they've had a decrease in their hearing. And so I'm aware of that. It's just, like I say, it's like we all said, the collaboration is really, really beneficial and necessary. So multiple times a year throughout the school year, we do check on the students. Unless, like I said, if they're just really thriving. I had a student, his mom was on it. I mean, the hearing aid was always working, always had batteries. Anytime I'd call, yep, I'm good. So, I mean, I still checked on it anyway, because I had to. But yeah, we do that often. There are set goals, there are set time frames. And then if someone obviously is, having troubleshooting issues, I have a family, everyone knows them and knows me at the school. Up here she is again. Hi, Molly. You're gonna, take a seat, get an office at our school. So, but it is fun. I mean, we work together and work, meet people, and we work together until it's resolved. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's amazing. I loved it. This one's just kind of for all of you in general, is doing what you do on a day-to-day basis. What is something you wish that parents knew, or something from their side of things that would kind of help the process of you delivering care for their child? Whether it be like an administrative thing, just any kind of information you think, if parents knew, that it may kind of help facilitate the whole process.
I'm sorry, that was for me, right?
Everybody.
Okay, what
Yes.
I missed the first part of the question.
You muted yourself.
I missed the first part of the question. There was a
No
pop-up on my
worries.
screen. I couldn't. Okay, go ahead. Can you say it again?
No worries. I was just saying, what is something you wish that parents knew that may help facilitate delivering care for their child on a day-to-day basis, or just throughout the school year?
I would say, like one of the most important things is kind of like, just understanding two things: understanding how important it is to really get enrolled in therapy as soon as you can for early intervention services. The sooner kids are getting intervention, whether it be hearing tests, hearing devices, therapy, the better their outcomes are going to be. Secondly, unfortunately, in Illinois, there's just like a wait time too to get therapists. There's like such a shortage right now of early intervention providers that specialize in hearing loss. So the quicker you get into the system, the quicker you can get into that. So I think that part, I think, is really important. I think another thing that's really important for parents to understand is how critical their partnership is to us. So for those of us as like early intervention providers, I can go to the family with lots of information about hearing loss and language development and child development. But to really make it useful for the family, I need a ton of information from them. So I need to know, kind of like what are their family routines like? What are their goals for their child? Maybe culturally, what kinds of holidays do they celebrate, or what's important to them as a family? Because you want to take the information that we know and make it as individualized for them as possible, because that's going to make it much easier for them to carry over. I think sometimes parents, think of like the provider as the specialist, and that they're going to sort of tell them what to do. And I think the truth of the matter is, the provider is the specialist on hearing loss, but the parent is the specialist on the child, and we need each other's specialized information to make it really work.
Yeah, I would say that's a great point, Rollen. I backing off of that. Yeah, just having parents be upfront and honest with us. And because I try to tell them nothing's going to hurt my feelings. I'm here to take the information that you tell me, what's going well, what's not going well. And because if I don't know what the problem is, and I can't fix it. And if it's something that's not really a fixable issue, but then I'll just provide counseling on it, and we'll figure out something together. So I think that's something, being honest if you're having trouble getting your child to wear their devices, or because I might have some tricks up my sleeve. And then that's something too I can speak with the other teams about, like Molly and Rollen, and we can all work together to try to overcome those issues. But yeah, like I said, nothing hurts my feelings. Asking questions, just being upfront with us, because that's the best way I can provide care.
Absolutely. And I feel bad, and I try to tell the parents when they do come in, like, I am not judging you. I'm not angry. Like, I really want to know, and honesty really helps. If they're never wearing it, it's okay, but we need to get them to start wearing it. And that's kind of like what I was saying before. If we can get, any parents that are on, or any parents that do listen, the importance of wearing the amplification, the cochlear implant, the hearing aid, bone conduction hearing aid, just the amount of information in those first critical years of speech and language development. And my one thing I really focus on is that it's brain development. Each time children hear new words, they hear new sounds, they hear new ideas, new neural pathways are connected in that auditory cortex of the brain. And the more they hear them, it's entrenched and is made permanent. But if there's that deprivation, or the auditory system is deprived of that, it doesn't know to create it. One of my favorite stories, and it's kind of sad, but the mom laughed really hard when she heard it. I had a little girl, and the teacher was saying the word, the vocabulary word was humongous. So humongous, humongous, humongous. And the little girl did not wear her hearing aids. The mom didn't think she needed them either, because she hears fine, humongous, whatever. So the teacher said, okay, well, can you tell me back the word that I just said? And she said, yes, 2 monkeys. So in a sentence, she hears this building is 2 monkeys. And so, our brain, our auditory system fills in words. Sometimes it picks the right word to fill in. A lot of times it does not pick that right word. So it causes confusion, difficulty with comprehension, vocabulary development, spelling, all these things, when we see a lot of children that do not wear their hearing aids and still have a lot of difficulty. And then the hearing loss, and a lot of people I struggle with, they'll say, well, it's something else. It's the hearing loss. It's the hearing loss. A lot of times there's other things going on with hearing loss as well. So it's hard for me as an educational audiologist to kind of, I don't know, to get other people to kind of listen, other team members, sometimes other clinicians, to hear it's not just the hearing loss, as an educational audiologist, as an audiologist, and what we know, a deaf child with very early math, they do really well with math because it's black and white, it's basic, it's here. So when, I have a little guy coming in and they cannot master basic addition and subtraction, and then I have a member saying it's the hearing loss, it's the hearing loss. And I say, it's not the hearing loss. So we need to look into it further. And it's, really important to notice hearing loss affects everything in learning. But then again, we know as audiologists and as educators what the hearing loss doesn't look like. And it's not black and white. Obviously, it's very gray. But to be aware, there are some things that we do know. I'm sorry. Hold on. I'm sorry. My son was slamming the door. I'm sorry. So hearing again. So it can be a challenge to, kind of get people on board and get people to hear that. But at the same time, I think that went back to my point of stressing the importance of wearing hearing aids or amplification cochlear implants, even for very, very minimal. Even if the children don't want to wear it, we need to work to get them and help them and be proud of it and be, this is part of us, this is part of you, and we need you as a huge member of our team to be on board with that. And I know it is not easy. I won't sit here and say it is, because I know it's difficult. It's disappointing. Like we were talking earlier and Sam was saying, we all have this concept, if we have children, oh no, if the child has a hearing loss, that's something kind of missing. But, they can function as well as and or better than some children with typical hearing. So I'm sorry, I kind of went off topic there.
That's okay. I'm going to switch gears on you just a little bit. We keep talking about all the services and everything, and what you guys do is fantastic. I think this has been awesome. Just to kind of flip the gears from the parent and the child to you guys a little bit. If you had to think about it between your programs and the clinics or vice versa, what do you think are some kind of barriers that exist between the different programs that make it a little bit more difficult to communicate, or just kind of facilitate the process to provide more efficient care?
I think one of the biggest barriers is time. everybody is so busy. We all get so busy doing our day-to-day stuff, and it's so hard sometimes to find the time, even though it's so important as as a therapist or a teacher for me to email the audiologist or give the audiologist a call. Sometimes it's just so hard to find that time during the day. And same thing for the audiologist. They're in clinic all day or seeing kids all day in school. That's hard. So I think that's the hardest part, is being able to find the time in your day to be able to do all the collaboration.
I agree. And the one of the great things I think that we've established since I started working with U of C several years ago, kind of as their contact person they asked, what would you like from us? And it was that records release to have the parents sign every time they come in, because a lot of times if we don't have that signed, then we cannot get a copy of a hearing test. And everything starts with that hearing test and what equipment they have, and if they've gotten new equipment and updated equipment, so we're troubleshooting and know what we're working with. So to have that permission and to talk amongst ourselves as clinicians with the private audiologists who see them in the clinic, and them also with us who see them in the educational setting kind of on a day-to-day basis. And we might be thinking different things, but if we have that open communication, and of course a parent has to give us that permission. So sometimes to try to get that, even a lot of parents don't have printers. A lot of parents, don't have scanners. So for us being in a work environment, that's easy for us. I'll scan it to you, I'll email it to you. And then they say, well, I don't have a printer, how can I sign that? And so it's those forms, those, medical release, share of medical information forms that are so important to sign. And I have had parents not want to sign them because they think, this is private medical, you don't need this, but we really do, to help your children, need these forms signed, and the ability to communicate between, early intervention, the private audiologist, the educational audiologist, and anyone involved in the team that is going to help the child to do their best they can.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It was going to be literally the exact same thing that I said. Time, like even because I have a patient schedule all day, and even the one time that I attended that IEP meeting, I had to put a block on my patient schedule to do that. So yeah, being able to have the time would be incredible. Yeah, the medical record release forms, man, when I had a patient walk out after I'm seeing them for an annual and I've forgotten to have them sign that, I'm like, no, because I know how much because it's a hassle for me. It's like in my own personal life for people to send me things to print off and sign and scan back in. So yeah, and having patients understand, I usually communicate that with the families too, is that this is for me primarily to communicate with the school. That's the purpose of this form, and for us to to share the records so that we're all on the same page. So that's just for any parents on the meeting, it's just so important to keep us on the same page, as having those updated forms for sure.
There's one thing that I do love about our team. We have a pediatric team meeting every 2 weeks. And one thing that we always, like before our send off at the end of the call, please make sure that you remember to get your release of information signs when you see your patients every single time. Just beat it into your head so it's always there. It's a very nice thing to be like, oh, yeah, that's right. I do get to remember to do that. It definitely goes a long way. And you're right, reduces a lot of hassle for everybody involved.
Okay. Yeah, I know in my chart reports now, and for the regular follow-ups, I have a space saved that says, if I have an updated one and what the expiration date is on it, and I copy and paste it over and over so I can remember to get that updated form.
Helps so much. Oh man. Oh, well, we've run a long way. Like, honestly, I feel like we could do this for another hour because this is like going. And I've noticed that I haven't even get through like half the questions I was going to ask you guys, which is great. I love it when the discussion flows like this. So I'm just going to end with one little small feel good question at the end of it, is just, how do you feel about what you do and why? Simple enough, right? And I'm a cheesy person. I would definitely go into the cheese mode.
I would say for for me in working in early intervention and working at Child's Voice, we get to see the kids, going from EI to school. So it's so rewarding to see, to remember these kids when we did evals on them as babies, seeing them kind of like, grow into preschoolers, grow into elementary students, and just seeing all the success that they have is really meaningful. That's what I really enjoy, is the connection that we have to families, the connections that we have to the kids. Also, our kids with hearing loss, have so many challenges. And in the beginning, there's so many challenges, so many difficult things for them to face, but it's so exciting to see, especially for the babies, each little step that they're taking with learning language and learning how to hear sound. It's so exciting to see them make these little steps every day and knowing what it's going to lead to.
I love that.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I agree, and I apologize. I am a talker, so a lot of this is me over talking. I'm sorry. Um, I clearly love my job. I mean, I've been doing it for 22 years, and I can honestly say I love what I do. I love to diagnose hearing loss. I love to, educate families and friends and colleagues and staff members about hearing loss. I mean, we'll be in meetings and I will have people say, wow, I never had any idea hearing loss had that much of an impact, or I've learned so much in this meeting. So just to kind of get out there and educate people about hearing loss has really been a really important part of my life. My husband has hearing loss, and that is not how we met. He did not wear his hearing aids till he was 17. And it has actually helped me to learn more about him and about his behavior and about his struggles and difficulties that the hear is from his hearing loss. So I kind of have an all around touches, all parts of my life. So, and I love, like you said, the kids, we see them from preschool to graduating from high school. And I mean, it's like, how does this time pass? And you see them, children into teenagers and to nearly adults. And it's just amazing to see the growth, with some of them. So yes, I thoroughly enjoy it. So I'm glad I picked what I picked.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say? I absolutely love what I do. Working with kids too is so amazing. And that's just as Roland and Molly were saying, I mean, watching them grow up and evolve into these, little people. And it's one of my favorite things. I know it's unfortunate and parents don't like this, but diagnosing hearing loss in infants. And I always say, this is, first of all, I mean, we love catching it early if it's there. And then I say we're about to embark on a very long journey together, and we're about to become very, very close. And I love developing these relationships with the families and being a part of this process with them. And it's always a challenge because kids are kids and they're all gonna, go through different phases in life. And I also love a challenge, and things are just going to change. I have kids that go through phases where they were their hearing aids and now they're not. We have to deal with that, or their hearing loss progresses, which is unfortunate with a lot of our hearing loss cases. And now we're moving from hearing aids and talking about cochlear implants. But being there every step of the way, and then also coordinating with all the other professionals, because these kids are so lucky to have all these people in their lane, to help them move forward and have good hearing.
That's great. Thank you all so much for doing this. I know this is a lot of information, but I know it's going to help a lot of folks and go a long way with the kids that you take care of. I was going to give you one more question, but somebody in the chat answered it. Thank you so much for doing that. Any other final questions before we let our panelists go for the evening? That's great. Awesome. Well, if you missed any portion of this, just a reminder, this will be on our departmental YouTube page, which you can find if you just go to youtube.com and type in UChicago Hearing. All of our videos that we've done for symposiums, for audiologists or for parents, they're all listed on there. They're available at any time. Please feel free to go. If you do have any questions at all, feel free to shoot them our way, and we make sure that the appropriate person gets that question so they can give you that info back. I really, really appreciate, once again, our panelists for doing this. Thank you so much. This is a couple of you, it's the second year in a row. Thank you for doing it again. But like I said, I think it goes a long way. I really appreciate y'all being here and taking the time out of your night to do this. And informing and educating on a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that people just don't see.
Thank you
Thank
for
you so
having me.
much.
It was a pleasure being
Absolutely.
here.
Yeah, I agree. It was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Josh.
Absolutely. Everybody have a good night. Thank you for attending.